Welcome to another C++ tutorial. My name is Mark Gingrass, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the debugger that's within the Microsoft Visual Studio Community Edition and most other Visual Studios and most other IDEs that's out there. So we start with a pause function at the bottom, and I'm sorry that I do everything in the main function because I'm trying to show you the concepts first. And then, as we build more elaborate programs, you're going to use those functions that I taught earlier in earlier lessons. In fact, 99% of your code is going to be in other functions once you actually start building something worthwhile. And we'll get there eventually, but we got to, take our steps to get the foundations set. So we have our IO stream included. And let's just do something very basic here, like declaring a character array, character myArray. And how do you do arrays? You set them in brackets. Equals. As long as you initialize it, you don't have to put the size. So I didn't put any size in there. I could have, but normally if I'm going to initialize it on the fly, I don't need to put the size there. But then I don't know what size it is. So how do I iterate through that? If I do for integer x equals 0, x is less than, I don't know, let's say I counted up and I thought it was a size of 6, x plus plus, put that in brackets, and let's print out this myArray. We're going to print it out one character at a time by putting the x in there. And let's just see what happens when we hit F5. Let's see if there's any, I don't see any red errors. Hit F5, and that normally starts the debugger in Microsoft Visual Studios. So basically I'm running it. It's asking me, want to build? Yes, I want to build. And it shows A, B, C, D, E, F, which here I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I. I know I'm missing the H. So we need to go 2 more over. So instead of 6, we can put 8 in there, correct? But instead of doing that, let's put a breakpoint and debug this as if we really didn't know what the problem was and we wanted to investigate what the problem is. This is going to be very useful for most of your programs when they don't generate syntax errors, but they generate some logical runtime errors. Okay, so to put a breakpoint in, you can put it anywhere you want on any line, but this over here on the left-hand side, this gray area is called the gutter. So the gutter, you can left-click on it, and you've probably done it on accident wondering what this is. And if you press it again, it'll go away. Left-click on it. Let's say I want to put the gutter at this for loop number 10 here, so I put it there. Now these 2 little options show up. I'll show you a little bit about those options here in a few minutes. Now let's run by hitting F5 or start debugging. And you're going to see, well, we made a change. I just got rid of some white space, so I have to rebuild it, which nothing should have changed. And you saw the console window pop up and then disappear. But it's actually running right now. The console window is still here. If I click on it, it's still here. It didn't print anything yet, because if you notice, I haven't even jumped in the for loop yet. It broke right there. It's called the breaking point. So it declared an array called myArray. Now, if I hover over myArray, you can see different pieces of data within that. And it gives me a memory address, that 0x0040. It's probably hard to see on YouTube or any other type of media that this might be on. But you can see that it's in quotes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I. So you know that myArray has, in fact, been assigned that character string, basically. Now you're at the for loop. Let's see what x equals. If I hover over x, it tells me it equals -858993460. Now that's because this for loop hasn't even been run yet. It hasn't. So the x was declared in memory. It said, hey, the operating system, give me some memory to store an integer value. It did that. However, it didn't assign it equal to 0 yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here, and now on your IDE, it might be slightly different, but if you go to debug and you see step into, step over, and step out, those are the 3 that you're looking for. And there's usually a shortcut over here as well. Right here, step into, step over, and step out. If I did step over, it won't skip the for loop, but it won't stop at each iteration of the for loop. So we're going to step into the for loop. See this step into? Oh, before I do that, look down here at this X variable right here. Notice it also shows you the -85, and then the memory location and the ABCDEFGI here. And it tells you it's a character array of size 9, which 0 through 8 would be a 9 count. Okay, so let's step into it by clicking Step Into or F11. For some reason, my F11 does not work while I'm running this camera application, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it instead. Now I'm inside of that mArray. You see this little arrow here that tells you where you're at. Now let's see what things equal. If I hover over the X, it shows me X equals, in fact, 0. In fact, down here, X equals 0. It tells you that. So now, it did not execute this yet. I know that because if I go, well, let's see, do I know that? It didn't print yet. Let's do, now that we've stepped into it, now we're going to step over, which will go to the next, it'll go to the end of the bracket. Click one more time, and now we're back at the top of the for loop. Let's hover over the X. X is still equal to 0, so we click it again. Step over. We're back into the cout. Now if I highlight X, X equals 1. It was 0, now it's 1. There it is here. See now, right now it's telling me my array sub X is equal to B. Right? So when the count is 1, which is 0, 1, you're at the B. See how that works? So you can follow the logic here, and you pretty much want to step over until the loop goes through, and as you do that, you can see what's going on. And let's see, we're, what number we're on. We're on number 3, and keep doing that, 4, 5, and so forth. And I finally got to the end, and it jumped out of the loop, and now we're at the pause, and it shows A, B, C, D, E, F. Not the greatest way to explain how you can use this, but you really should learn how to use this. You can put this, now let's say you wanted to be in the for loop anyways, just click it right there and run the debugger. Now you're already in the for loop, so if I highlight over the X, it should equal 0 because we've executed that. Hit the step over again, it goes back to the top, step over, and so forth. What you might get confused on is if you started the breakpoint at the 4 and you clicked on step over, it'll run the loop without breaking at every iteration, and it'll come right out to line 15 here. Just practice with this and play with it a little bit, especially when you do have problems, and start reading what some of these values are, because you think they're one thing, but they're actually something else, especially when you get into some nested loops or some more complicated code here. So that's what I wanted to show you. But while we're at it, let's get rid of all these breakpoints. Let's stop the debugger. Let me show you how to find a better way to get that size of the array. Let's do that by creating a constant integer value called myArraySize and set it equal to something. And what we're going to set it equal to is using the reserved word Sizeof in C++. See how it turned blue? That's an indicator that's a reserved word. Sizeof myArray. Now that doesn't give you the actual size of the array. That gives you the size of, in memory, the size of your array. So we're going to divide that by Sizeof myArray sub 0. See how that works now? What it's doing is it's taking the entire size of all of that array and dividing it by the size of one element of that array, the first element. It could be any element in the array, but you know the array's at least got one element in it. You might want to check to see that. Well, that's a different, well, you can't really do that without doing this. But anyways, so you divide the entire thing by the size of one element and you'll get the amount, the count that you want to use. And that should work, no problem. So instead of using the number 6 here, let's go ahead and put in myArraySize. Let's rerun that by hitting F5. It'll debug, but there's no breakpoints, so it's just going to run. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I. Okay, so that works just fine. And this is the piece of the code here. Now, why did we make it a constant? We made it a constant because once an array is set, it's set in stone on the size. So we know that we don't want anybody or anything changing myArraySize. Let's say you jumped into some functions, or your buddy was doing all the code in between here, and this was 300 lines up, and nobody knows it, and your buddy just happens to do myArraySize equals 15 accidentally, perfectly legal to do. I don't know why it's turning red, but perfectly legal to do. Oh, it's turning red because it's a constant, and it's telling you, because you made it constant, it's going to give you a syntax error. Now, check this out. If I go to run it now, if I hit F5 and build it, this is a great example. It actually turned out to be. There are build errors. Would you like to continue with the last build? No. Show me the errors. And it's going to tell me somewhere down here that I tried to change a constant value. Expression must be a modifiable L value. That means left-hand value, which is basically the left-hand side of this equation. So myArraySize automatically gave you a syntax error, which is exactly what you wanted. Now your buddy knows he can't do that. But if you got rid of this constant, it would still run. Let's comment this out. It'll still run the same. Hit F5, rebuild it. It's going to run exactly the same as it did. No problems. No syntax errors, no compile time errors. Now your buddy comes in there, or you come in there a year later and you forget that you can't change myArraySize. Perfectly legal. There's no red lines. Hit F5 again, and you are going to build it. Let's see what prints out now. See that garbage there? It's trying to access, when this for loop goes through, it's trying to access the memory location that's past the actual size of your array. And it allows you to do that if it's in the scope of your program. And that could lead to real serious problems. And you don't want that to happen ever. So that's why if you make this a constant, this will become an error, and you'll immediately know I shouldn't do that. See how that works? So anytime you definitely don't want something to change, error on the side of making something constant. You can always make it non-constant later if you choose to. And I hope you learned something from this little bonus episode, but there'll be plenty more to come, so stay tuned.